Hello again, Steve here with a few words that I thought of sharing this evening. Somebody mentioned this concept called Pascal's wager to me a while ago, and I'd heard about it before. And it's an argument that it's probably best to believe in God because the consequences of doing so are not that great. But the consequences of not believing, if the story of hell and torment and so on is true, are very grave indeed. Now, this is just a general concept, right? But this extends to a lot of areas of our lives where we get ourselves involved in other forms of unbelief or fantasy, perhaps, for the convenience of it. And I think there's a biological component, a mental component, and a fitting in into society component of all these things as well, I think. More so than anything else, probably. And one of the examples would be, say, statism or global warming, for example. Climate change hysteria, where the story is that if we don't do something, if we don't get on the bandwagon, the ocean's going to rise however many feet, and millions of people are going to drown, etc. So it's better that we just accept some more taxes so that politicians in their infinite wisdom can save us from this situation. Well, I think that the challenge or the issue with this approach to life, this Pascal's wager approach to life, is it results in us being, well, let's say, just at least a little bit lazy, right? We haven't put on our thinking caps and reasoned things through. I believe more and more, and I don't know if I could be faulted on this, and I may very well be, but I believe very strongly that the logical approach to analyzing something is something akin to mathematics. Not as quite as accurately, because mathematics is incredibly theoretically accurate, right? Because you can prove in a logical sense that a 1 and another 1 plus equals a 2. That's very clear. That shows a logical sequence. But also, a lot of things in our lives, a lot of concepts in our lives, we can follow them through little by little and get a similar equation outcome, right? And global warming being an example. If we take at face value, if we analyze what the politicians and the media and so on are telling us, what we find out is that the so-called scientists are not, for the most part, independent. For the most part, these scientists get most of their funding from government, right? Because they work at universities, which are largely publicly government slush fund funded. So they are dependent on the political whims of the day to a certain extent for their livelihood. So even if they're not conscious of it, they will slant their opinions, their so-called science, in the direction of the political whim of the day to gain favor, possibly, right? At least these are the things we have to throw up. We have to throw, when we're analyzing something, we have to say, okay, what is the possible motivation of what people are saying? And then, of course, we can look at the data as well. And we can look at what perhaps independent science says. And then we can look at things like, okay, what about all the other scary so-called scientific projections and computer models and so on that have back in history? What came of that? I mean, I'm old enough to remember that in the 70s, for example, the Pascal wager was we better believe in the coming ice age. In fact, I remember when there was a liberal government-funded tractor trailer toured the whole country in various different places, went to high schools and elementary schools and so on, to show this whole model, this whole mock-up of how the ice age used to be, and then it went away, and then dirty old human beings came along and polluted everything and created all this acid rain pollution in the sky and everything. And here comes this lookout, this huge ice age is roaring back again. Well, I don't see much of an ice age. It seems to be they're talking about something else now. And another example would be, in using logic, is the pollution du jour is CO2. And anybody with half a brain realizes that CO2 has never been a pollutant. It's part of the atmosphere. It's what plants, the green side of life, feeds on. That it is its food, right? And also, historically, I don't have the data in front of me, but anybody can look it up. The world's CO2 level in the atmosphere right now is at a very low level compared to what it has been most of history, or at least at the high points when the world was lush with greenery. So we're not even anywhere near that. So there's a lot of things that can come up when we put on our thinking caps and we begin to do a little bit of research, rather than just going straight to the default Pascal's wager of saying, oh, well, everybody believes it. It's not that big of a deal if government gets its way and it puts in a little wee carbon tax on, and it's not going to really hurt me. It's worth it. Surely those guys know what they're doing. Surely those guys like Al Gore, sure, yeah, they live in big mansions and so on and burn lots of fuel and fly on big carbon producing jets to go to conferences in Paris and all that sort of thing. Sure, they do all that, but it's for the good. It's for the greater good. You might as well take that Pascal's wager and, believe in it. Let's not put our thinking caps on. Let's not use any logic whatsoever. And it'll be fine. Because, after all, according to old Pascal, we're better off because the consequences, if these guys are right, they're so dire. We were swimming in water, where we used to have land. And it's going to be so hot that we won't be able to live. And there'll be so much carbon dioxide in the air, we won't be able to breathe. I mean, we better give those guys what we have. We better give our money to the priest when he comes around with his collection box, because what if this whole angry God story is actually true and we didn't give our $10 worth or our $20 worth when that collection box came around. So I think it's an easy way out, rather than using our natural logical ability to factor these things through, at least to a small extent. So, hang on a second here. How do those guys know all this stuff? Do they really believe it? I mean, if they really believed in global warming, would they be flying on jumbo jets to a conference, burning hundreds of gallons of fuel and spewing it into the air? Are you serious? I mean, wouldn't they row a boat across the ocean maybe if they really meant it? Or wouldn't they just get on a Skype conference with the other leaders to talk about it? I think it's more of a big party, really, than anything serious. They can't possibly believe it. They certainly, by their actions, they don't. But the vast majority of people, it's the same old thing as concept of God, right? I mean, God can do all these sort of stuff. It's like a split morality, right? There's morality for those guys, for those godly ones, and there's morality for the rest of us. We have to cut back and drive smaller cars and pay carbon taxes and everything. Meanwhile, the so-called leaders fly around the world in big, huge jumbo jets, spewing out all kinds of pollutants to go to their very important climate conferences. But so many of us, when I say us, I don't mean me for sure. Oh, I do in some cases, probably. Not in the case of climate change or global warming. But so many of us do take Pascal's wagers, or have for sure. And it's something to be aware of, I think, because if we become aware of it, we can put on our logical thinking caps and realize, start asking questions, right? By asking questions, ideas can come to mind that are probably more accurate than what we've been fed. What we've been fed so that we get scared and we give our resources over to those who really want our wages. Steve here again. Great chatting. Talk again soon. Bye for now.